Awesome. Are you guys finally ready to hear someone else talk besides us? Because I sure am. Totally. I gotta just kick it off this. I don't do speaker bios, any of that. I'm in the fortunate position where I have relationships and know a lot of these speakers. I have to say I'm absolutely humbled on who's going to come up here and speak. Her name is Jessica Fialkovich. She is the founder of Exit Factor. She's the president of Transworld Business Brokers. I love Transworld and met actually Jessica because my business broker, Roger, is here today in support. Was fortunate enough to sell a business through Transworld, had an awesome experience. Jessica's a best-selling author. She's a keynote speaker. She's also built 5 companies and she sold 4 of them. I truly believe she's just a leading female entrepreneur, especially in the mergers and acquisition space. And I can't wait to see what you have for us in store today. But when it comes to getting the most out of your business in terms of increasing value, profit, she's the one to talk to. I'm going to end with this before she takes the mic. She told us something on our podcast that will stick with me forever in business. 3 things happen to a business when it's all said and done. It either shuts down and dies, you sell it, or it's a profit play and a legacy give on. There's some people here that have the opportunity to take over businesses from family members, right? That's the legacy. So it either dies, gets acquired, or it's a legacy play. So without any further ado, please welcome Jessica Fialkovich.
Thank you so much, James. It's good to see everybody. Thank you so much for being here early this morning. You guys are all nice and early risers. I heard there was a 6 a.m. workout going on. I was not part of that this morning. Who worked out at 6 a.m. anyone? All right, those are dedicated people. So before we get into today's presentation, just a little bit about me. Is anyone, I know you guys all came from different areas of the country, anyone from New Jersey? Okay, so you're my people. I've lived in Colorado for almost 15 years, but I'm from Jersey, and you know you never get the Jersey out the girl, right? So it's April 9th, 2012. You guys will appreciate this story, I hope. And I'm sitting in Madison Square Garden, 5 rows behind the stage in the press box. And I'm waiting for the band to emerge. And first comes out Patty, and then comes out Big Man. Actually, it was a Big Man, 2012. So it was Stevie. And then the crowd roars, and there's a loud Bruce. And Bruce Springsteen, the boss, my hero, emerges on stage. And all my cares, my worry, anxiety, stress, everything from the last 48 hours just melts away. So, what happened in 48 hours before that? How did I get to that place? Well, I was raised in New Jersey. I was raised by an educator and a nurse. I was taught my whole life, do not be an entrepreneur, do not own a business. Whatever you do not own your own business. It will end in failure. And the reason for that was that my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents failed in the pharmacy businesses. They failed in owning bars and restaurants, and I didn't know this was possible, but they also failed in the bootlegging business way back in their 20s. So that was like what my parents grew up with. They saw the ups and downs of owning businesses and entrepreneurship. So I was given this mantra of like, go to school, get a degree, find a safe job, work for the man for 40 years, and you will be safe, secure, and your life will be set. Well, fast forward to 2008, 2009, I moved out here. I was living in Aspen, Colorado, working in commercial real estate development. We were rebuilding a ski resort funded by this little bank called Lehman Brothers. So if you guys remember, you probably know how that story ends. My husband and I were both working for the same company, so didn't have a diversified household. And some gentleman in a big skyrise in New York was looking at a spreadsheet and just crossed both of our names off of a list. And that was really the realization for me that having a job was not safe and secure at all, that the only way we were going to be able to control our futures was to build our own businesses. So entrepreneurship skips a generation, apparently, and we embarked on our own businesses, my husband and I together. Our first businesses was in the wine industry. We moved to Naples, Florida. We opened a luxury retail wine store. We had no idea what we were doing. I didn't know anything about wine, but we ended up building this company that sold wine all over the world. In the US, Canada, Hong Kong, we were trading bottles of wine up to about $25,000 per bottle. Was the most expensive bottle we ever sold. And it took off really quickly. You know, we broke $1 million a year our first year in business, which if you're familiar with small business stats, only about 4% of all businesses in the US ever gross $1 million a year in revenue or more. So a lot of you are at that mark. It's an incredible place to be. So we hit that our first year, second year business grew, third year the burnout started to creep in. We're working retail hours, we're working with collectors in multiple time zones across multiple continents, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I hadn't seen or talked to my family in months. I stopped working out at 6 a.m. or whatever time it was. I even missed some Springsteen concerts. But in all seriousness, the burnout affected my relationships. My husband and I, when we did speak, it was only to fight about the business. So I was back here skiing in Aspen on March 31st, 2012, woke up and I was like, we're gonna sell the business. We're gonna sell the business today. I'm done. I'm not thinking about it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Done. Fly back to Naples, Florida, where we were located at the time, listed the business in 24 hours for sale. Our broker at the time said, hey, I don't think we can sell this. Nobody wants it, but we're super lucky and we got 3 offers. We had it under contract for full price within 7 days, and that's what brings me back to April 9th, 2012 in New York. So I signed this offer. Now I'm dancing and enjoying myself, living still to this day one of the best concerts of my life, no regrets there. But I had no idea what I had just set in motion. Because the deal that I just signed seemed good at the time. But what I didn't realize is that that deal left money on the table for me, left me with a huge tax burden, tied my hands to the business owner, and I picked the wrong buyer. So she destroyed the business so bad that still to this day, I have not set foot back in Naples, Florida, because she destroyed the business and my reputation. So that set me off after that journey and that deal to embark on how do we set ourselves up for ourselves and our businesses up for sale so we not only get the most out of the business, but we get the best deal possible. And over the last decade, I've built one of the fastest growing and most successful business brokerage firms located here, Dallas and Nevada. We've helped over 700 business owners exit at this point, and my personal mission is to help more businesses get sold. Because the truth of the matter is, most businesses do not sell. Yeah. So the truth of the matter is most businesses in the US, and these are all US-based statistics, do not sell. So James mentioned when a business ends, there's really 3 paths. It can go out of business, you can sell it to a third party, or you can pass it on and it's a legacy. Well, 87% of all businesses go the first path. They go out of business. Only 13% transition on average. And that's where my mission is to get that number up. So more of our businesses transition. If you think about it, this is not just about us as owners. This is about the people that it affects too. So when our businesses go out of business, they don't transition, people lose their jobs. Customers lose the people that they're working with. They establish new relationships. Local economies lose business, often to bigger, more corporate entities. So the trickle-down effect is huge. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to cover 3 different areas. The first is we're going to talk about the impact of planning and how planning does affect your business sale. I'm a big believer that the best time to start planning for your exit or the transition in your business is the first day of your business. The second best day is today. So if you didn't start the first day of the business, it's okay. We're going to talk about 2 value factors that influence the valuation of your companies and how to increase that value. And then because we're in this, super stable economic time, we're going to talk about how the sky is not falling yet. So there's a lot of macroeconomic things going on, and we get lots of questions of how is this going to influence buying and selling of businesses. So we're going to talk about a couple of those, and then reserve some time for questions. So I kind of mentioned you don't build a sellable company overnight or even in a year. A lot of my colleagues will tell you, when you're planning for your exit, you have to have this pretty exit strategy in a binder. Some companies can charge like 5 figures for it. But the secret is that exit planning and exit strategy is just a little work over time. It's not actually a plan in a binder. I mean, how many of you have put together a plan, like a marketing or a sales plan, and it went exactly how you documented it at the beginning of the year? No. Sometimes I get one hand, right? But so it's the same thing with exit planning. Your company is going to change over time. So little by little, just working on an exit strategy and some of the tips that I give you today, I suggest just covering like 1 or 2 hours out per quarter to sit down and do it like you would do strategic planning with your company. So this is how you build a business that's sellable. First, you have to have a foundation that's sellable, and then some of the things that we talk about today on the qualitative factors are going to tell you whether that business is sellable or not. Once you go to sell, a buyer is going to look back at the proven results of your business, meaning they're going to say, hey, what happened over the last 3 to 5 years financially and operationally in the company? So in an ideal world, if you're preparing for sale and you're trying to structure your exit, you want to do so at least 3 years in advance. So you have that 3 years of proven results in history. And then the last step will be your exit year. So an exit does take on average somewhere between 9 to 12 months depending on the structure and the buyer. So you have to plan for a year in that process. But I said in an ideal world. I love sharing stats. A lot of the audience questions are always about stats. So, in an ideal world, we're planning in advance. We talked about, not all of our plans work out exactly as we thought they were going to. I find this, sometimes my team finds this amazing, but as an entrepreneur and a leader, I'm actually a person too. So we just have, as leaders, we have real people problems. We have real life problems. We're not these entrepreneurial heroes that are protected in a bubble from the rest of the world taking effect on us. I sold my company because I was burnt out. The truth is 95% of business owners sell their company for personal reasons. Not because there was an exit plan or it was the timeline they were following or there's like some big financial gain. They're selling for reasons like I did, like burnout, other opportunities that pop up in your life, negative changes in the business or industry that force a sale. Unfortunately, things like health, wellness, illness, family issues, these are the reasons people sell companies, not because it was the plan or this was the timeline they were enacting. So even though we have this plan and we're going to carve out these 1 to 2 hours a quarter to make sure that we're executing on this plan to build a valuable company, one of the reasons that we want to make sure it's sellable at any time is because if one of these things happens to us, we need to be able to act now. And we need to be able to execute on what I call our exit options when that time comes. Before we dive into kind of the 2 value factors, I do want to share some secrets that the M&A advisors don't tell you, not because they're like hiding it from you, it's just because we all forget that these things can happen if you plan in advance. So if you are not inspired to plan in advance to maximize your company or protect yourself, if just one of those personal situations happens, maybe these will trigger some reasons to start preparing for an exit in advance. First, the right structure prior to and during a sale can be the difference between 63% and 0% in taxes on your sale. 63% is the state of California. Is anyone in California? As a C Corp? S Corp. C Corps in California, you're looking at a 63% tax rate on your sale if you don't structure it properly. So that's the difference. This usually takes at least 1 year, sometimes up to 5 years to plan in advance to get the lowest tax rate possible. A couple other ones, positioning your business for multiple buyers rather than one buyer will always get you more money. Who has an email sitting in their inbox from like a private equity firm or search firm? It's like, hey, I'm interested in buying your business. So I call that a professional phishing scheme, but they're trying to get you to sell to them before you go on the market so there's no competition. You'll always get more money when you take it to market than if you're just going to sell to one buyer. I mentioned this earlier, but an exit strategy does not mean some long document. So colleagues of mine, they're like, hey, you need an exit strategy. We've got this pretty binder, this pretty presentation. That's not an exit strategy. An exit strategy is something that you're going to work on over time, 1 to 2 hours a quarter or a week as you get closer to sale. And then the last thing is before you implement any growth or expansion plan, you want to make sure that it's going to positively affect the exit value of your business. So for example, I was working with a client of ours. She's in the real estate industry and she owns a number of residential brokerages in Texas. And she said to me, hey, I'm worth $5 million today. I think if I open 20 more locations, I can be worth like 75 to 80 million. It's like, okay, well, let's run the numbers. And so we did. And it actually only increased her value to 20 million, but it was going to like 10x the number of headaches that she had because now she's got 20 more locations and X number of more brokers, right? So you always want to think if you're going to do some type of strategic growth for the potential upside and exit, run that value through first before you make that decision. Okay. Technology. So I think of exit planning as like having a retirement plan for your business. How many people have a retirement plan where you contribute to like a 401k or an IRA, things like that? So does an IRA, so I think about this like, if you weren't preparing for the exit for your business, it'd be like not funding your 401k and then the day you retire, like immediately expecting it to be full magically. That would be really nice, wouldn't it? So it's the same thing with preparing your business for sale. So the options that I mentioned earlier that you want to have at any given time when we're looking at those quarterly planning sessions is, yes, you're working on your strategic timeline to sell, but you also want to evaluate whether these 4 options are available to you if you need to exit immediately. Illness comes up, a move comes up, a different opportunity comes up, something changes in the industry that forces the sale. So the 4 options you have is you can milk the cash out of the business and close the doors. And that's totally viable for some businesses in some situations. You just want to do it in a strategic manner so you get the most out of family members. This could also include a business partner or a friend that's involved in the business. And the last option is you could sell it to a key or group of key employees. These are your only 4 options for exit in companies. So one of the things I like to do with our companies is say every quarter at any given time, what is our number 1 option right now if we have to exit, and what's our backup option? Like if our number 1 option is like, hey, we know we're positioned for sale, we can take it to the market and sell it to a third party. But if that didn't happen in a certain time frame, we're also ready to milk the cash and close the doors if we need to. So continually evaluating that while we're also running our 3 to 5 year exit plan or whatever the time frame is. So now we're going to move on. We're going to talk about value factors. One of the biggest questions I always get is how much is my business worth? What's the value based on? How do I increase the value? All that stuff. So this part of the presentation is going to answer all those questions. So first, the formula for determining a business's value, the standard amongst all industries, amongst all size businesses, is what's called the market method, and that's known as the EBITDA times a multiple equals the valuation of your company. So EBITDA is your earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a function of your net profit. Either you can calculate it off your P&L or your accountant can do it super fast for you, or should be able to do it super fast. That's the easy number to determine. The harder number is the multiple, right? So this is the question I always get, like, oh, well, I read online that commercial cleaning companies sell for 1 times revenue or 10 times EBITDA. What's the number, right? And the truth of the matter is it's a range. So right before I hopped on stage, I just want to make sure I had accurate information. Right now, commercial cleaning companies that are generating between 1 and 25 million in annual sales are selling for a median of 4.2 times EBITDA. That's the median. Now the range is between 0.9 and 18.2 times. So what makes one company worth 0.9 times and another company worth 18 times? That's some of the more qualitative stuff in the business. And we're going to talk about a few of those things in a couple slides. But that's how your business is run. That's what makes you different from your competitors. That's what makes you more attractive to buyers. So really, we have 2 measures that we can pull in these businesses. The first is quantity. So we can look at the quantity. The quantity is our EBITDA number. That's like I would say, the easier one to control. That's when you bring James and Angel in and you start working on your sales. You're increasing your revenue, but you're also increasing your EBITDA. You're focused on your profitability first. And there's a few key things that I recommend for business owners to also bolster their profitability in their business, that you can do this in that quarterly planning session, super easy. So the first is that we're going to review our books and records quarterly personally. So I do this even in all of my businesses still, where I'll go through the P&L, all the expenses once a quarter, and just make sure we're avoiding what I call expense creep. So I'm better at this in my business life than in my personal life. So like, who's ever looked at their personal credit cards and they've noticed they're still paying for something that they thought they canceled years ago, right? Like, I'm still paying for Showtime even though they killed Damian Lewis off, or didn't kill him, moved Damian Lewis off Billions. Like, that's the second time we lost him in a Showtime series. I should have canceled that a long time ago. I'm still paying for it. The same thing happens in our businesses, and the more employees we have and the more access they have to generate expenses or subscriptions, the more this is going to creep, this expense creep. When we first started doing this in our business, the first year we increased our profitability by 40%. All those dollars add up. Remember, we're getting paid a multiple of earnings. So every dollar you drop to the bottom line is going to repay us 3, 4, maybe 18 times in the long run. The second is you can benchmark against your industry. So a tool we use for our clients is bizminer.com. You can pull a report and you can see what companies are paying for different expenses as a percentage of their revenue. And you can also sort it by size companies, things like that. You're also, you're sitting in a mastermind of your colleagues, so you can probably ask, like, what percentage of revenue do you spend on advertising, payroll, things like that. We did this with a client that was in the salon industry. She owned a chain of salons in Denver, and she had to sell during the pandemic, which was obviously not an ideal time to sell. And so we took a look at her 2021 budget. We said, hey, how can we position your company for sale? Well, when we looked at the benchmark report, she was overpaying on rent, insurance, payroll, and advertising, like significantly, double digits overpaying. So what that enabled her to do is go back and renegotiate some of those expenses or shave some costs. So she was able to position her company in 2021 to be the highest profitable year she's ever had, even though her revenue is still down because of pandemic restrictions. The third one is to remove or limit non-essential and personal expenses in your business. So I joke all the time, I could give a whole presentation on business expenses we see buried in P&Ls through M&A transactions. We've seen divorces, Lamborghinis, Rolexes, vacation homes, you name it, it's in there. And I think this has become a really big problem in our industry. Some of you who's heard of the term add back when you're determining business value? So add backs have gotten out of control. And basically an add back is if you ran a personal expense for your business, you're going to add it back to the bottom line. You're going to say, hey, this was really non-essential to the business. It's gotten so out of control, I actually had a past client call me and he said, hey, I need you to represent me on this deal that I'm going to buy. I'm going to send you over the recast of financials and their add backs. So I pull up their P&L. They added back every single operational expense to this business because they were like, hey, if you take it over, you have no expenses. Like, you just magically have no expenses, no staff, no payroll, no nothing. So I called him back and I was like, hey, Kyle, I'm not going to represent you in this deal. You can't do this deal. There's just no way. So it's gotten out of control. The truth is, yes, you can add back limited personal expenses to your P&L when you're going to sell the business. And when I say limited, I mean like 1 or 2. Like your owner's salary, maybe your health care that you're paying for yourself. Everything else cannot be in the business financials if you want to recoup that when you go to sell. Which, I get a follow-up question on this is, okay, Jess, I get that, but what if I want to increase the business value and I don't want to pay taxes on my full income for that full year, right? Is that what everyone's thinking right now?
Correct.
Yes. So I'm not an accountant and I'm not a tax attorney, so run this strategy by both of those before you enact it. And I can tell you what many of our very successful clients do is they have their operating business that they are going to sell. And those businesses have very clean financials. And then they have a non-operating business, a consulting company, a speaking company that provides a management fee back to the operating company. That's where you get the revenue. And in here is where you have the Lamborghinis, the Rolexes, the trips. Hope to God not the divorces, right? That's where all this comes through. And then when a buyer goes to inspect your books and records through due diligence, and the banks do that, they're only inspecting the operating companies. You only have a single add back, which is that management fee that's getting paid as a form of salary to yourself. So strategy some of our clients have used. Again, run it by your accountants and your lawyers first. Most of them like it, some of them do not, full disclosure. So, before we move to the qualitative factors, I just want to talk a little bit about what types of business buyers are in the marketplace. So these are the 3 types of business buyers. The first group is private equity firms. Is anyone unfamiliar of what a private equity firm is? So a private equity firm is a group of investors that are buying a number of different companies, and it's usually headed up by a management or leadership team that's going to manage that investment for them. Strategic and synergistic buyers are companies like yours. So a strategic buyer is a competitor to yours that's going to absorb you. Typically, those companies are about 25 to 100% bigger than you are today. A synergistic buyer is somebody that's in a similar industry to yours, but not competing. Think of them as like referral partners or things like that. Individual buyers are people leaving corporate jobs. And this is could be somebody that's retiring from corporate, or what we've seen in the last few years is, who's heard of the Great Resignation? All of these millennials and Gen Xers leaving corporate. That's funding this group of individual buyers. So what percentage of the entire business buyer market do you guys think is represented by private equity firms?
75.
75. Any other guesses? 50? All right, what about strategics? Any guesses on that? What was that?
Majority.
Majority, 50%? Okay, 10% in here. Individuals, any guesses? No? All right. Ooh. What? There we go. 10% private equity, 10% strategic, although that is a growing number. 80% come from individual buyers. So it's opposite from what everybody thinks. So this is really important when we're going to talk about the next part of how we're going to design for sale, which is designing the qualitative factors of our business, because just like you have to know who you're talking to for a potential client that you're going to bring on, you need to know what the profile of is the person that you're going to be selling to. You have to design a business that's attractive to the majority of the buyers to be successful in a competing environment. Did anybody in the audience come from corporate and buy a business to become an entrepreneur? You did? You did? Okay, so what was your job in corporate?
I was the CEO of a software company.
Okay, so you managed operations. Did you have to get involved in HR?
Oh, of course.
Okay, did you have legal matters you had to deal with? Did you deal with sales?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not gonna, this is probably not a great example for me today. Did you, sorry, did you run marketing?
I did, actually.
Okay, all right, so you did everything. So most people that are coming from corporate are coming from like a siloed position. Like they're coming from sales or management, maybe operations. They don't get involved in all the different hats we wear as business owners. So who in the last year has had to fire an employee or have an HR conversation? Who has had to deal in a legal matter in their business? Who's sold something in their business? Who's had to clean up after the employees because they've left a mess in a building, or they've left a mess in your conference room, anything like that? So what ends up happening is we're wearing all these different hats as business owners. These individual buyers don't wear all those different hats. So when we go to sell the company and we're like, hey, we also do this, and we do this, and sometimes they get involved in this, it starts to scare them a little bit. And if we're looking for a buyer that's going to wear all the same hats as we do as owners, we may only find one buyer for that company. And if that buyer is willing to buy our company, now we're at their mercy to dictate the terms and the conditions under which they're going to buy the business. If we can remove some of the hats that we're wearing as an owner and maybe just get it down to like management and sales, then we might find 10 people that are attracted to that business, and we have desire but not yet competition. But if we're able to remove all of our hats and become what we call an owner absentee business, where you're really just operating as the CEO of your company, now you have 100 buyers competing for that business, and that's where you start to get that more 5, 6, 18 times multiples for those companies. So how do we do that? A quality business is efficient, is above industry standards. It also is going to be a producer of time, choice, and cash flow for the current owner and future owners, and it's predictable and recurring. But one of the main things that buyers are looking at is they're looking at these businesses as investments. So as an investment, we don't want to be taking on a 60 or 80 hour a week job. So we want to start to remove ourselves from the operations of the business as much as we can strategically over time. And a lot of other people talk about this. Jim Collins talks about seats on the bus. E-Myth talks about how do you get out of different seats so you can become an owner and not an operator. The truth is that there's a strategic way to do it. So buyers are scared of two things. They're scared that when you leave, the customers will go away. And when you leave, your employees will go away. Those are their two biggest fears, and those are the two biggest risks in the transition of the company. So we're going to strategically remove ourselves from roles in the business that address those risks first. The first one being any revenue generating roles. Now, when we first start our companies, we're responsible for revenue. Even as the company progresses, we still may have closing conversations, be the rainmakers in the company. But over time, we want to get our percentage of revenue down to less than 20%. So we want to contribute less than 20% of the overall annual revenue to the company. Otherwise, we're going to be viewed as a key strategic employee that can't leave the company after the sale. The second is customer-facing roles. So customer-facing roles could be in your industry where you're actually like managing the account, talking to the clients, seeing how their service is going, things like that, if you have account management or anything like that. Again, risk because you're the reason they're doing business with the company, not because of your team or your employees. The third area is we want to remove ourselves from the production roles, which I assume in this room, like most of you are probably out of those roles. You're not actually doing any of the services that you're scoping out to your clients, right? Yeah. So production roles are the third area. And the last area that makes us completely owner absentee is removing ourselves from frontline employee management. Having a general manager managing those frontline employees, so you're focused on your leadership team, your executive team, and you've risen to that CEO level. That's also when you can take a step back, take what I call the 3-week no phone vacation. When you've reached that level, you've reached full owner absentee management, and that will automatically increase your business value 0.5 to 2 times more on the multiple just for sitting in that role. So this is the biggest qualitative value driver that you can do in order to increase the value of your business and move that multiple up in the range to the higher end versus that 0.9 times. So at this point I get asked a lot of questions of like, okay, I get this quantity and quality and all this stuff and designing my business for sale, but like what's my first step? What is the first step I need to take to get on this path of doing an exit strategy for my business? And the first step is you really need to understand where you're at today. You can have a business valuation or an exit assessment done, is what we call it in our company, and it tells you what your business is worth today and what you have to do to sell it for your potential or future goal value in the future. And I kind of think of this as like you going to like a doctor and getting a checkup. Like you have to understand where the business is at today and what's operating well and maybe what needs an operation. And then the strategic work is the gap, right? So you find out, hey, my company's worth $1 million today. I want to sell it in 3 years for $10 million. That gap, or that's where you need to solve. And that's what those quarterly sessions are about, increasing the quantity on that side, and also increasing some of those qualitative factors to move up your multiple. All right, so before we get into Q&A, just a few questions and charts that I wanted to share about what's going on in the business for sale market today. We are in a period of high inflation, increasing interest rates, which are probably going to continue to go up. Those things are not affecting selling businesses and buying businesses, but they're not as affecting it as much as the rest of the marketplace. So when you go to sell a business, I mentioned, we're looking back historically at the last 3 years of performance. So typically, valuation increases or drop-offs in our market are going to lag behind the economy 18 to 24 months because of that reason. So just a couple things if you're like a little wary about what's going on right now. This is the key financials of active business listings for sale. This is all businesses that are listed for sale. I'd say probably below about $10 million. And you can see the averages are pretty low. The average business in the US that sells is only about $400,000. So there's a huge range, obviously, but lots of small businesses selling. So the blue line is their revenues. The orange line is where their net profit, or what's called their seller's discretionary earnings in this chart. And you can see through Q2 was still increasing. So businesses are still doing pretty well. We just actually got the Q3 data yesterday, and it dropped down a little bit, but I think it dropped down -2%. So not looking at a huge impact. This is in terms of closed transactions. So they're listed for sale. This is closed, so still performing really well. This is the median sale price. We did have a major run on businesses the last 2 years with all the money that got infused through PPP and EIDL and all that kind of stuff. We saw a huge spike in business buyers, and that drove multiples higher. Right now, we're seeing them level off. So they jumped up pretty big, and now they're kind of leveling off. They're decreasing a little bit, but more, I would say, flat than anything else. This is sold businesses reported. So you can see the really big dip in 2020 Q2. That's actually the biggest dip that's ever happened. It was even lower than 2008, 2009. And then Q3, we just got data again yesterday, and that is about flat. So, like I said, the whole kind of summary for this for me is that the sky is not falling yet. So what's going to happen in the future with business valuations in terms of where we're at? There's two key things that we have to watch as business owners that are preparing to exit sometime in the next 5 years. The first is interest rates. So most business buyers acquire a business with some form of debt, typically an SBA loan. And as the interest rates goes up, the debt to income ratio gets tighter, and the banks aren't able to lend as much to fund that deal. So there's only 3 ways you can solve that problem. One, the buyers have to bring more cash. I cross that out because that's not happening. So if you look at savings rates and debt rates for individuals, right now, we're back, flipped in the normal direction for Americans, which is we have more debt than savings. During the pandemic, it actually flipped temporarily, and people had more savings than debt. Now it's back, and debt's at an all-time high rate. So buyers do not have more cash to bring to the table. The second option is the sellers can reduce their price. So we can reduce the values of the company. Or the third option is sellers can do what's called seller financing and finance that gap. It's actually not as super scary as everybody thinks. About 85% of all seller notes get paid and paid in full. You just hear the stories of the ones that went really bad. The second thing we're watching is inflation. So inflation is increasing costs across the board for every industry, every aspect of our businesses. You guys all know this. And what I would say is, and what we've been encouraging our clients to do, you've got to maintain your profit margins. And I know it's hard to increase prices at the same escalating rate of what our costs are increasing, but we have to watch that every year and make sure we're not sacrificing our profit margins over time. Because if you are planning an exit in the next 5 years, or one of those situations happens and you have to exit, and your profitability has been declining, that's going to really harm the business value, and in some cases it might make it even unsellable. So if you want some additional resources, copies of the slide or anything like that, you can take a picture of this QR code and just put in your details and select from the menu what you want. I've got copies of the slide. I've got some books here to give away, but we can send you a copy of a book too. And then I have a free checklist that you can walk yourself through in those quarterly planning sessions that I mentioned. So that's all the presentation I have for today. But we have time for Q&A?
Yeah, we have time for Q&A.
Okay, perfect.
Can I just